Welcome. My name is Matt Bogosian. I'm Executive Director of AMCC, the nation's manufacturing community of practice. And we are excited to be on this pre-game virtual call with participants who will be at the Manufacturing Momentum Summit, August 4th through 7th in Detroit, Michigan. And I'm happy to be here with Ken Poole, CEO of the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness, and his team running the show, and Michael Horrigan, president of Upjohn Institute for Employment Research. So it's a treat to be with both of you. Michael is formerly associate commissioner with the Bureau of Labor Statistics and has had many roles, including a prior stint as senior labor economist with the Council of Economic Advisors. So it's exciting to be with these two gentlemen. And the goal of this call is to get your take on the objectives of our meeting together in Detroit and how we can help each other work better together to meet our common objectives. So instead of just sending out an agenda and having people show up in Detroit, we're adding these preliminary video calls to prepare you, me, all of us to engage more effectively when we're together in Detroit. So we want you to hear, the three of us are going to make some opening comments, but we want to get to your take, on what we have for the agenda so far so that we can, make much more progress better together. Part of my comments here up front is to frame the challenge the way AMCC stakeholders see it based on the evidence that has been building for the last 10 years and the experience of regional leaders around the country trying to strengthen the defense industrial base and manufacturing in general. The historical basics, we all know, if you're already involved in this, at the end of the last century, we divested from manufacturing, and that was a mistake. Made us vulnerable on many fronts. We need smarter products that solve problems and improve the human condition, and that's not ever going to go away. And we've seen it in the last 10 years. There's been a lot of study about that we need a strong cornerstone of manufacturing in this country. In not every manufacturing industry, but there's key ones. And this 2021 report, David Van Sicklen, our operations director, can drop in the chat there, is about key manufacturing supply chains. We list them as there's 6 overlapping industries, and the first one is defense. So defense, energy, transportation, ag, IT, and health. And we have, going back a long time, weakness in the defense industrial supply chain, and we need to strengthen that. Sad but true. We got to deter dictators intent on harming us and our friends. And so, how do we do that? And we need dual use manufacturers that are profitable and have resilient supply chains. And part of addressing that challenge is that we need our manufacturers to adopt newer technologies, which is why in this gathering, we're going to have the Manufacturing USA Institutes involved, and others, faster, more effective tactics for tech transfer. That's a big piece of this, which then gets us to what folks in AMCC network, talk about as the ecosystem of support for manufacturers. That's the language we use, for all the different support in a region that a manufacturer needs to thrive. Each region has different organizational infrastructure to support, to match the particular set of manufacturers. But we've learned over the decade that there are common elements in every region for the manufacturing ecosystem of support, that each of them need to be operating sufficiently for that region's manufacturers to thrive. We call those elements the Big 6. And first on that list is a sufficient workforce and training ecosystem in that region. So workforce and training, that's got to be effective, but it's got to be effective in the context of all the other 5 elements of a thriving ecosystem of support, which includes infrastructure and site development, supply chain support, research and entrepreneurship, trade, international investment, capital access, and operational improvement. So it's important to know that this summit is going to be focused on defense industries, and it's also, which is one of the 6 priority manufacturing industries for long-term American prosperity, and it's also focused on workforce and training, one of the big 6 subsystems that any region with manufacturers needs to have working well enough for manufacturers to thrive. So it sounds like a lot. It's complex, but we're making progress in spots over the last 10 years. Too slow and insufficient for sure, because we're fragmented by geography, organizational silos, distributed governance. It's a long list, but these manufacturing momentum summits are important. DoD Mantech and CREC did one in 2023. AMCC hosted one at the end of 2024. We're all intent on working together to change that, partnering where it makes sense. We've got a lot to talk about in terms of those challenges, but importantly, the solution sets that we need to produce tangible outcomes. Marshall Gans at Harvard describes 5 activities for effective social change, big change, the kind of change that we're all trying to manifest. The first being building authentic relationships, which we're doing here in AMCC and in so many other different forums. What we're doing here on these pregame calls, what we hope to do in earnest in Detroit. The second is storytelling, really building common narratives, because we need to do that better, and we should be talking about that. The third one is, of course, strategizing for important change-producing tactics. The fourth one is taking those actions, and the fifth one that we don't often get to, which is really critical, is structuring. We need better structures in this country so that we can build a stronger defense industrial base, a stronger workforce for the defense industrial base, and across the manufacturing cornerstone in regions around the country. So that is the framework of kind of the way we see manufacturing momentum building. Is manufacturing going to be a 20th century, huge percentage of our workforce? No, but it's an essential cornerstone of our workforce that's not ever going to go away. The proximity of where design and manufacturing takes place, it's critical that it be close to one another in key industries that we're going to need for long-term prosperity. So that's my opening salvo, Ken, in terms of setting the frame about how manufacturing momentum is important in general, where defense fits in, where workforce fits in, and let me hand it off to you to take it from there. Ken?
Perfect. Thanks, Matt. And first of all, thank you and David, both in the AMCC community, for being sort of core supporters of the work that we're doing here and being core advocates for change and addressing some of the issues that we're talking about. This is part of a series of conversations that we want to have. So I don't want to spend a great deal of time talking. This is the theme of what we are trying to do, is we recognize there are a lot of folks here who are on this call who will be joining us in Detroit who are experts, and we want to leverage that expertise. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about what we're doing within a larger context. This is actually an effort to begin a conversation that will be both in person and virtual, ongoing. And fortunately, we have support from the Department of Defense, but I want to also reemphasize that while the defense industrial base is at the core of what they're interested in, DoD buys everything. So when you're thinking about advanced manufacturing in almost any sphere, it's probably something DoD is involved with. And so you don't have to feel like you're too far afield from where we're going. Our broad goal in this is really we do want to prepare the manufacturing base to be the most productive and technologically advanced. And in order to do that, we need a world-class workforce. We know that this isn't anything new, and we're not going to try to retread old ground. And in fact, actually, we all acknowledge there's a skill gap. Many of us also maintain there's a body gap. In other words, there are not enough people. to solve the problem, even if we had all the everybody trained to do the work that needed to be done. So we have a significant workforce problem, but we also have a significant who's going to do stuff problem. And some of that was to some degree offset by the fact that we hollowed out a lot of our advanced manufacturing segment. Now we've got many of our supply chains we're trying to bring back at the same time we already have a workforce shortage. So how are these new policies going to really encourage U.S.-based manufacturing if we don't even have the capacity to support what we have currently, and we feel like the part that we have currently isn't really sufficient to address all the needs we have. So we've got twin challenges, and I want us to begin to think about that, because I don't want to necessarily solve today's problem. I want to actually think about tomorrow's problem. There are lots of people working on today's problem, and maybe if we can figure out tomorrow's, we'll begin to help address this. But we're not ready for tomorrow's problem yet, but particularly to meet at the scale that we're going to need to achieve change. So that's really at the heart of the work that we're doing. We know we've got technology advancing. We know we have global supply shifts. We know automation and AI are changing the way redefining job roles, basically. We also know that demographic shifts are changing how work is done and also what expectations are of work. So there's another piece of this that we need to think about, not just on the demand side, but on the supply side of who's available and what people are willing to do, and where technology might be part of our solution. So the momentum that I like to think of in the manufacturing momentum is really focused around thinking about tomorrow's problem. To use the old catchphrase, let's skate to where the puck is going and not try to solve today's problem. Yes, people are working on that, but for the benefit of what we're working on, we're focusing on the problem of tomorrow. And we think that making small pushes now, we can actually affect big change into the future. And those are some of our operating philosophies as we think about this. And the reason why these conversations now are important for us to pick our head up out of the immediate challenge and think about where we're going. So the core problem that we're trying to frame is how do we grow the advanced manufacturing workforce fast enough to meet the needs that we have? And then how do we ensure that this workforce is ready to protect our strategic interests? The problem, and even DoD with its $1 trillion budget, can't solve it by itself. So the problem is too big for any of us to solve by ourselves. So we got to work together. That's at the fundamental core of the operating philosophy we're using in this work. So we've been working. CREC's been working on this problem for a couple decades in one way or another, either collaborating with the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Network or collaborating with the Department of Defense and their industry resilience programs, or and now more recently collaborating with the Manufacturing Institutes and with the DoD Mantech. But we also know that that these solution providers aren't sufficient either, because we also know there are lots of other folks working on related parts of the challenge. Mike Horrigan and I, actually, it's been 2 years ago almost, Mike, when we sat down and had our conversation where we said we need to really be using data to help drive some of our thinking about where we're going, and also to help us understand what's being impactful. And you can talk a little bit about some of the work that Upjohn's been doing. But we've been thinking about this collaboration with Upjohn, with data being at the core of helping us to drive our decision-making and our thinking about this. And so it was a natural partnership for us to begin to collaborate with Upjohn. Mantech, of course, Mantech's focus is in the Education and Workforce Development Group is really focused on sort of the next generation technologies that DoD is interested in. They're really trying to bring those technologies to fruition. But in terms of education and workforce development, we need to be thinking about who's going to actually produce the things that these new technologies that we're going to be creating. So this is like a perfect confluence of interests where we see ourselves as conveners, documenters, collaborators, storytellers, if you will, with Upjohn sort of bringing in sort of a research and evaluation and data influence and also role as a pilot agent. And you can talk a little bit about that as well, because you've got some on the ground experience. And then with DoD and Mantech in particular, helping us to bring the big hairy problem of how do we solve this issue and with the urgency of our national security and economic interests in mind. So we also think that because, as we've sort of laid out this issue, that none of us, even with those sort of creative thinkers, none of us alone can solve this problem. So we reached out to AMCC on a couple of different occasions. We've reached out to other partners, the MIIs, of course. We're working with the communities of practice that EDA's funded, the national NSF's regional innovation engines. SBA's got their regional innovation clusters. There's a number of different players that are operating in this space, working on different aspects of the problem. And we thought, what if we began to network these networks? Which is sort of the philosophy of the approach we're taking. We don't think that any of us got the solution by ourselves. And in fact, actually probably couldn't implement it even if we had it. So we got to work together. So we came up with the idea of the summit as a convening mechanism to bring these networks together. And in this particular case, the way we are approaching the summit is it's a way for us to think about what is the problem that we're trying to solve and get some agreement, because there's lots of different problems when we all talk about this, get some agreement on where we ought to focus. What are the solutions that people are trying out and which ones are working? And so we're spending a day on really just sort of highlighting some creative ideas that are going in 4 different areas around talent supply, around the alternative training models, around partnership building, and around the use of data. And then what are the technology areas of particular strategic interest? And to be fair, we focused on the defense strategic interest, but there's also critical interests that are critical national interests that have been highlighted. And we decided to just focus in on 6 because that was as many as we could do in one meeting, around cybersecurity, advanced materials, energy storage, robotics, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and I probably forgot something there. But the point is like, what are we doing in those specific spaces to help us get ahead of the curve and to begin to think about where that puck is going? So that's really sort of the notion of what we're trying to do with this meeting and where we hope to go. We think success looks like what are the technology impacts? How is technology impacting the workplace? And understanding that a bit better, anticipating where that's going to change the nature of work. We think that if we can share strategies and work collaboratively together, that will be success. If we can agree on ways to track success, that would also be very impactful. If we can begin to coordinate across our networks, that would also be impactful. And then begin to think about how we support one another to scale the best ideas to really make an impact. So that's really what we're trying to do with this event. And the event to me is like one thing of a whole series of things we're going to be doing over the next few years focused around this particular area. So I just sort of wanted to just give us a setup for where we're going. And then, Mike, maybe you could I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about sort of how Upjohn is seeing this as a way to help drive your agenda as well.
Sure. Thank you, Ken. And thank you to Matt and David as well. So the first thing I want to say is that I think part of the spirit of this upcoming conference is to basically have a conversation, to learn from each other. And but to do that, we need to have a framework in terms of how we're thinking about the problems that Ken was referencing. And at Upjohn, a core mission that we have at the W.E. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research is actually a legacy of W.E. Upjohn from 1930, which is helping people find work. In his particular case, he started farm co-ops during the Great Depression before the unemployment insurance system even started. But what we're looking at right now is we're especially concerned about the future of work. What is going to happen in the next 10 years and 10, 20 years? And one of the lessons that I've learned is that in manufacturing, in advanced manufacturing, we actually have learned a lot of those lessons already, in the sense that there is a lot of automation. There's a lot of cutting edge technologies that have been adapted to. There are challenges, and we want to talk about the challenges of how we find the skilled workforce in general. But I think one of the pieces of conversation is that from the experts that are coming to this summit, we can learn a lot from each other in terms of what we've already done, as well as identify the challenges moving forward. In terms of those challenges, and Ken mentioned, I think the word data associated with my name at least 5 times. So I will give you a piece of data. One of the framing elements that I think is really important is demographic shifts. If you look at the latest Congressional Budget Office report, and you look at basically their estimate of where the population is going, the population in the United States, without an increase in immigration, is projected to begin shrinking as of the year 2033. And if you take a look at that from an employment perspective, which is what we do a lot of, in the last 10 years, the average monthly change in employment was about 126,000. And CBO projects that in the next 10 years, it's going to be around 69,000. Sorry, I had to look up the number. And what that really means is that we're still going to be producing more, and we're going to be doing it with a lot of advanced technologies, with a lot of automation, with a lot of AI, work that in some sense has already been done in manufacturing, but where we're going to have the challenges of finding the workers that firms need in order to work with those advanced technologies. And I think that's part of the crux of the problem. Where do we find those workers? Where's the supply coming from in terms of the educational system, in terms of the training system? So a key piece, I think, of this summit is to identify what works. Now, I know that every program that's out there, and we have lots of programs for workforce development, has not necessarily been evaluated, but we have people who have been running the programs that have a variety of different experiences and metrics, along with some programs that have been evaluated, to say, we believe these particular programs work. One that Ken mentioned, that we have pilots. It's not really a pilot, but a program that we have in Michigan that I love is one that we call the Going Pro Talent Fund, where firms are basically competing for state money in order to create training programs for their workers. And what they do is they identify their training needs and then identify potential solutions, collaborations. So they may say they want 50 electricians or whatever the particular training need is. And then they create collaborations with community colleges, with private training entities, and figure out a way to deliver that training. In other words, it's market driven. And I think one of the elements of this summit is to try to figure out, how do we best communicate with firms in terms of what their needs are? How do we elicit those needs? And how then do we then arrange training programs that will meet those needs? Especially as we have employment trends that are shrinking over the next 10 years. The other thing that I think is sort of keeping with this with the idea of the summit is to not only look at the demand side, which is what firms need for skills, but then to look at the critical supply side. What Ken mentioned as, are there enough bodies? And supplement that with, are there enough bodies that are skilled to do the job? And how do we actually then use the educational and training system in order to create clear pathways into those jobs? A lot of this is crystal clear from the point of view of somebody who wants to be an engineer. There's a pathway through the education system in terms of a BA and a master's, or even higher. But I think what's less clear is the pathways that we have and that we need in order to get people licenses, certificates, registered apprenticeships. In other words, the signals that the market has to say, through these training programs, we know we have people who are qualified in order to do X, Y, and Z. So when we're talking about things like electric vehicles and cybersecurity and other aspects of advanced manufacturing, how do we know that the folks that we've trained have been trained in terms of what the firms need, and also have gotten the skills that they need through the education and training system? And so I think that's part of the challenge here, is not just we have a shortage of workers, but how do we actually train the workers up in order to meet those needs going into the future? And as I said at the beginning, I think there are lots of examples in advanced manufacturing where we've solved those problems, although there's, I think, new challenges that are coming down the horizon. And I think learning the lessons that we have and applying them to the future of work is going to be an incredibly valuable conversation for this conference. So kind of my perspective when I talked to Ken about this a couple of years ago was, I really want to get people who are doing workforce development in a room to talk to each other, to say why they think what they do works, especially if we have programs that have been formally evaluated. And I love the idea of doing this within the context of advanced manufacturing, because I think there's so many innovations that have been and will be introduced over the next 10 years.
That's great, Mike and Ken. Thank you both for that. And thanks for those modeling good interaction behavior, right? We're building relationships. So let me ask everyone, just put your name and affiliation and your email if you want in the chat. I mean, if we're going to all be together in Detroit, talking with one another, let's get to know each other. We have a lot of folks that we see on this list from the AMCC community that are on our Monday national calls. And so they'll be used to this kind of banter on these calls. We're recording this call, we can put it out, but this is, let's get it going now. So Alan in Virginia, nice job there. And Melissa and Angela, Jay, thank you for putting that in there. This is hard work. It's good hard work, but it's important hard work. And we need to scale the change, Mike, that you're talking about. We have a lot of great stakeholders on this call alone, and we'll have more at the summit. And so what we set out in the email, what do you want to get out of the summit? What would make your time here worth it? And so we want to hear from you now about reacting to our comments. We see pals out here. We could call out folks, and happy to do as we do on our. So Alan from Virginia, yeah, go ahead. Your defense manufacturing community, one of the designation programs that DoD is honchoing. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that, Matt. And Ken Poole, I very much appreciated your introductory comments and the phrase that you used, getting ahead of the curve in terms of the technology, or rather the impact of new technologies. And in that regard, one of the things that I'd like to contribute, it has to do with the digital transformation that's going on within the Department of Defense, and our need to be fully apprised of that. So recently, for the past 3 months, I've led a thread in which our organization is participating in a manufacturing readiness assessment overhaul that's being led by the Systems Engineering Division of the Department of Defense. This is an ongoing effort. It's about 20 years old, but what they're doing right now is absolutely transformational. And by the 1st of June, the Department of Defense is going to be releasing a new workbook on manufacturing readiness assessment and manufacturing readiness levels. But that's the last mile in DoD acquisition of anything, whether it's software or hardware or major assets in it. As it is right now, unfortunately, MIIs have not been participating. The participation comes from a significant number of companies in industry, and then a significant number of entities within the Department of Defense, including the services. And what we found over the past 3 months is that digital transformation of this kind is going on in parallel in other federal agencies that we as defense manufacturing communities are aware of and participated in. NASA, for example, and the Department of Energy, for example, have their own major initiatives in digital transformation. And I'm sure that our admiral, my boss, Mark Whitney, he's going to strongly support this effort that Matt is leading for this conference. And whatever we can contribute by way of helping to get other people smart on the digital transformation within DoD as a practical element, we'd be more than happy to do. Over.
Well, that's going to be a part of this conference, Ken, right? So Ken
Absolutely.
has done a great job of bringing the Manufacturing USA Institutes into this 3-day meeting. And so maybe, Ken, this is a good opportunity for you to showcase what what we're thinking about in terms of the agenda with the institutes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Two things, and I just dropped in the chat. One that would connect directly to the work that you're doing, Alan, around manufacturing readiness levels, because in some of the work that we're doing, research work that we're doing, we're working with RTI on trying to build a workforce readiness level equivalent to go with that manufacturing readiness level. We want to begin to share some of that. So let's place on your radar that we want to share the work that you're doing at the meeting, particularly since it sounds like it'll just be finishing up and might be ready to share. So let's make sure that's on our agenda. And then this work that we're doing on workforce readiness to align it. And in fact, actually, we do have a series of outreach specific to the Manufacturing Innovation Institute's Education and Workforce Development Group leaders that we're planning over the next few weeks, really focusing in on some of their needs, specific needs, and we'll be able to make some connections. So let's do that. And in fact, actually, that's the whole point of the meeting, is we're trying to create opportunities for some of these kinds of projects that are going on randomly, or not randomly. They're going on with obviously lots of focus and effort being built, but to give them an opportunity to connect with things that are going on elsewhere. And the idea of connecting these different networks together so we can share some of these activities is precisely where we want to go. I would also say that one of the things, the hidden agenda items that I'll say here, but won't put down in writing anywhere, is that we're working with Mantech, EWD, and with the MIIs to develop a workforce strategy for Mantech. And our focus, because the Mantech group that we're working with is focused on emerging new technologies, by definition, our focus is not on today's manufacturing needs, but on tomorrow's. So we want to figure out what kinds of success stories are already operating that we can begin to highlight, create visibility for, support, and actually help leverage funding for. That's really an ultimate goal out of this, is that it really matters if we can take the really successful examples, prove that they're successful, i.e. let's use evidence, and then help to raise visibility and investment in those success stories to bring them to scale.
Yeah, and part of that, Ken, is around metrics, and so
Right.
I'm excited, Mike, about your involvement in this. Hopefully, we can share about from the 2024 summit. We had a whole session around the metrics of the ecosystem, not just the manufacturers, but the ecosystem of support around those big 6 items, and so. Really, there's a lot of interest, and this is led by NIST and many other federal agencies, and including Deloitte, on how do we bring more of the research focus on the ecosystem of support necessary, because of all the big 6 items, workforce is probably the most fragmented and needs really a lot more attention so that we can have more effective interventions, to produce what we need. Let's hear from you. We teed it up in the email. What do you want to get out of this summit? We have a lot of stakeholders that are recognized there. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Petra Mitchell. What do you want to get out of the summit? Oh, okay. She's all right. Let's try somebody else. Let's see. Phil Singerman is on here. Phil Singerman, what would you like to see this summit produce? All right. Anyone? Trey Smith down there in Mississippi. Trey?
So Matt, while you're waiting for someone to unmute, I just want to make a point that falls on yours, which I think is a really good one. Evaluation is hard work. And I noticed that Demetri Nightingale is on the call, and she knows above anyone else how difficult and complex and challenging a good evaluation can be. But at the same time, anybody that's running a program has lots of metrics that they follow in terms of whether or not there's a return on investment, whether or not the cost structure is working, how many people they serve, et cetera. So I think one of the things that could be a benefit of this conversation at the summit is to find out what it is that people track and what kinds of arrangements they make for evaluating their programs so that they can scale them up from a local to a countrywide or a nationwide kind of enterprise. So I think I don't want to underestimate the difficulty of the task, but I think hopefully the people coming to the summit will be able to contribute to that conversation.
Yeah, big time. I mean, a lot of the stakeholders there, it's complex, Mike, right? But they're not intimidated by the scope and the challenge.
Right.
So, we don't have to go to the end of the hour. We just wanted to have an opportunity here to tee this up because this is, like Mike's saying, this is hard work. And you're already working off of metrics somewhere in your region, right? What are you, John Betts, bring that.
Yeah, I was waiting for an opportunity. I was going to ask Michael and Ken, are they working with any of the coast city organizations like Automation Alley or the MEDC, the MEP in Michigan? I'm not sure if you're familiar with Automation Alley. We've got about 3,500 small manufacturers as members, all the universities in Michigan, and all the community colleges in and around Detroit itself. So we've got a good process for making noise about things that are happening. And I'd like to connect you with our marketing team and our ops people and grants programs to talk about it. We did a DEMIS program with DOD, and we're currently discussing with them about some projects in advanced manufacturing. We've got a great relationship with Lyft right there in Detroit. So please utilize me. I put my email in there, but we can connect you with locals to help promote and hopefully participate in some of the agenda items.
Absolutely. Terrific, John. Thank you. And we will be following up with you. We have been working with MEDC. Actually, Quentin Messer has already agreed to join us, cool. Who's the Secretary of Commerce there. And then we've also been working with DRP, Detroit Regional Partnership, as kind of a co-host. We have had some conversation with Lyft. We hope to do a site visit there, knock on wood. And we are also working on a couple of other site visits. Brendan Buff, who is coordinating the meeting, can maybe give you a little bit of background on some of those kinds of things. We're trying to do those the day before the meeting starts. We are actually going to be physically at the Federal Reserve, which has some physical challenges in terms of getting in and out because of where it is. But they offered to pay for food, and they had me at hello. So we're going to be at the Federal Reserve, which actually is another sort of point. That will limit the size of the meeting. So I think we have a cap of 175 people that can come. We're trying to first focus on a representative group of the different networks that we want to see participate. So it's really important if you're thinking about it, to get in early. We are going to be we're recognizing not everybody who was going to want to come will be able to come for lots of reasons, not the least of which is the first week of August, when I know a lot of people are on vacation. It's in Detroit, which might not be physically, geographically easy for some folks to get to for whatever reason, or they may not have travel budgets, which is obviously for some of the federal agencies it's going to be a bit of a challenge right now. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out. But honestly, we want to have a conversation. So one of the things I want to mention is every one of the sessions are designed for conversation. Even when we're in a plenary room, we're going to be doing buzz groups where you're sitting at your table talking to one another. So the whole point is, if we have 175 people, we have 175 experts in the room that we want to capture and pull out ideas and thoughts from. And we're going to be capturing that information and sharing it afterwards. We're planning to do a big report on things that we've learned from the meeting. and also continue to use it to drive conversation going forward. So we're doing a series of webinars before, a series of webinars afterwards. We're probably going to be doing some virtual town hall kinds of meetings for folks who can't join, but this is an opportunity to influence the direction of defense workforce policy, and hopefully actually on workforce policy more broadly, particularly as it relates to advanced manufacturing. So, John, we definitely want Automation Alley engaged, and we're going to be. You've already been. Brendan's going to be following up with you.
Got
He
it.
already knows that.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
And
Steph.
John, just as a postscript, I
Oh,
know
go ahead.
that Steph has her hand up. Obviously, Michigan is very important, and we also hope to have a very large representation from across the country. But in terms of work that we're doing in Michigan, we've been closely aligned with the EV Jobs Academy, for example, and some work that is more recent work that Jonathan Smith's doing to look at the transition of manufacturers who are perhaps going from ICE to something else, or going from ICE to EV. So yeah, I'd love to connect as well for the summit, but as well as for some of these other kinds of activities.
Yeah, we're a partner on that project that you just mentioned, the ICE to EV.
Good.
So yeah, lots of synergies, I think. So looking forward to connecting. Also, one of my colleagues, Emily Varner, on the call. When you reach out to me, you can use the same naming standard and include her as well on this, because I'm doing a vacation next week, so I might miss those.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Steph, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steph Edelman. I'm from Executives Partnering to Invest in Children. We help employers figure out childcare solutions for their employees and kind of furthering economic development by removing workforce barriers. So I'm new to this group, new to the conversation, but I think one of the goals that I have as thinking about this meeting is really the sort of body gap that you all have been talking about, and recognizing that there's not a lot of, we're a nonprofit. There's not a lot of organizations that do what we do to just help employers think about some of these systemic things that are in the ecosystem, but that are really impacting their ability to, bring in the workforce that they need to do the work, right? That step even before training, Ken, that you were talking about, is just like, who's going to do it and what are the barriers there? And so I'd love to think about, what conversations we could be helpful in by being a part of really thinking about that body gap, and the role that, different manufacturing organizations or associations can play in helping remove the childcare barrier, and thinking creatively and innovatively with you all about that.
If I could comment, I think one of the supply side issues that's critically important, especially as we do experience shrinking employment growth, is reaching out to communities that are having challenges in terms of entering the world of work or remaining in the world of work. I didn't get into it in my opening remarks, but and Ben Damrow, who's on this call, is in charge of our workforce development unit. But we have a Pulse Research, applied research center that does a lot of work in the childcare space, especially with CEOs, talking to CEOs about what they can do in order to reduce that barrier and challenge with their current employees or prospective employees. So it's really a direct conversation with employers. So I think, reaching out to communities that are traditionally have been challenged in terms of the world of work, but where these are folks with very potential of having very good skills, is something that's going to happen more and more. And so the supply side aspect of this is part of the conversation of the summit, both supply side and the demand side. What are the challenges on both ends? And I think it's important to keep in mind, and I'd love to be in touch after this in terms of the work that we're doing.
Yeah, Michael, and we know Kathy and the Pulse team as well.
Okay.
So would love to coordinate with them there and participate however makes the most sense.
Great.
Courtney Taylor, I see you on camera down there in Mississippi. What do you want to have come out of this summit?
So I think, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm one of those people that has a vacation planned and I can't come. So I really hate that, but I've got a couple people coming. I think one of the things that has become very, very apparent very quickly is, yes, there are really tactical things that we need to get done, but the thought of losing our MEPs kind of quickly became the reality of, hey, we need the networking and the information. And so all the information is going to be good, but I also think connecting with other states and having some opportunities to deep dive into what they're doing is going to be really helpful. We're tackling a lot of automation. The body gap is obviously a very real thing. We're doing a lot of work in K-12 because we can't keep doing, just defense work for adults.
I just want to return that.
On that. So I think
No.
that there's opportunities to discuss kind of some of those deep the deep into the pipeline work, then yeah.
Thanks, Courtney. Other folks, what you're hoping to get out of this?
I will say, Courtney, to the point you were raising, we're thinking about as we sort of work with DoD on their strategy, and I think that's, because DoD's strategy will likely influence lots of other folks too, is this notion around building solutions that recognize we also need to be we've got the supply side where we've got to get more people sort of participating in the workforce and participating in manufacturing. We've got education solutions, which can't be just about putting people into classrooms. It's really also around how do we use technology, education technologies, to help deliver skills in real time. We've got data issues around how we focus on what are things that where is the puck going, to use that expression? Where is technology going, and what kinds of skills are going to be required there? Also, what things worked when we were trying to solve that problem in some other space, and will they work in the same approach? And then sort of the fourth pillar is sort of how are we going to actually manage and govern this system, which is not going to be a system as much as it is going to be a confederation of collaborators. And we're learning a lot from the communities of practice and from the other collaborations that are going on. What can we take and begin to institutionalize? And I think if you think about those kinds of issues as kind of the pillars of the work that we're doing, that might help with guiding how we're thinking about the work and different areas where maybe you're not trying to solve all of those different issues in all those four pillars, but maybe you've got some creative solutions in one or two of them. Those are also going to be valuable to the work that we're doing.
Debbie, welcome. Debbie Broadbart.
Hey, I am Debbie Bradbart, as you said. I'm at Virginia Tech at our new innovation campus in Alexandria. So we sit right outside of Washington, D.C., and I'm running a program for veterans, service members, and military families. And part of what we're focusing on is creating these pathways into the tech workforce. So I would love to integrate this conversation about veterans and military and how they might be leveraged to provide a solution to some of the workforce issues we're talking about, because I think they have, often have very technical backgrounds. They're often well educated. Sometimes their credentials don't easily translate into the civilian workforce, but they are a good match for what the workforce needs. So would love to see if we can integrate some of that into the conversation.
Great comments, Debbie. Super important, so that we can tap into all of our different communities. These are great jobs in many cases that can really bring dignity to work and a middle class lifestyle, in addition to making the products that we need, right? So it's a twofer. Other comments from people, what would you like to get out of the summit? We're going to be together. Do we want to I'm thinking of the agenda. You guys have all seen the agenda, the 3-day agenda. You know, with so we don't need to go through that. That'll be redundant. Yeah, Debbie, you still have your hand up. That's anybody else have any comments? We can wrap early. David, can you tell what's next? What's going to be expected with our friends at CREC coming into the Detroit Summit? Yeah. Oh, you're on.
Thanks for that, Matt. This will be the first of 4 webinars that we'll be running leading up to the event on the first week of August. So we'll have a next one towards the end of next month, and then we'll follow up with that in June, and a final one the last week of July, so everyone can meet and we can level set right before the summit kicks off. So please stay connected with us. We'll be sending out updates. We'll have an update out from this call right now, a recording of it as well, and more to come on those next couple of events in the future.
Great, thank you, David. Any other final comments for this webinar?
Yeah, I would say real quickly, Matt, to the folks that were asked the question and didn't have an immediate answer, you don't have to have an immediate answer. Think about it. The summit's coming up in a couple months. So think about it. What is it that you want to get out of it? Share that back with us, because we're in the midst of developing the program. We're in the midst of identifying presenters. We've got some on board. We don't have everybody on board. We're trying to make this we're also trying not to over present and make this a conversation. So we're going to have provocateurs to help guide discussion. So you should also be thinking about what is the discussion you want to make sure happens either there or in some of the webinars that we have coming up.
Right. Yeah, and that's an important point, Ken, in that in our breakout sessions, rather than a panel of 3 people talking at you for 50 minutes, it's going to be a shorter presentation with a facilitated discussion and plenty of opportunity for people to engage and ask questions.
Ken, Mike, thank you both, and thanks everyone for being on this call. We're going to have this recorded, and you can distribute it to other people that may have missed it. And yeah, we'll see you in Detroit. We'll see you at the next pregame webinar. Thanks so much.